Welcome back, everyone, to The Deep Dive, your detailed look into history's really baffling puzzles, brought to you by the Memory Room podcast.
And today, yeah, we're tackling a big one, a file it's haunted the American imagination for more than 400 years.
Mhm.
The Lost Colony of Roanoke.
It really is America's oldest sort of cold case, isn't it? Sometime between 1587 and 1590, this entire community, what was it, 115, maybe 117 people, men, women, children.
Just gone, vanished. From Roanoke Island, which is off the coast of North Carolina today.
And this wasn't just some random group. This was England's first real ambitious attempt to plant a permanent civilian settlement in the New World, all bankrolled by Sir Walter Raleigh's drive.
It's a story defined by, well, silence, ultimately. So our mission today on this deep dive is to really sift through all the layers of information we have. We're talking original 16th century accounts, early colonial reports, right up to the, sophisticated archaeology and even digital analysis from the last 10, 15 years.
Right. The goal is to move past the ghost stories, the spooky stuff, and try to pin down the most plausible, evidence-based fate for those colonists.
And pretty much every theory, every shred of evidence, it always seems to circle back to that one single clue they left behind, carved into wood.
The word Croatoan, that's the core of it. So let's unpack this thing.
Okay, so to really get why the 1587 colony failed, you absolutely have to look at the disasters that came before it. It all starts with Sir Walter Raleigh, big favorite of Queen Elizabeth I.
He gets this huge 10-year charter in 1584 to colonize Virginia, which was named for the Queen, of course.
Exactly. And Raleigh's motives, you mentioned ambition, but it wasn't just glory, right? It was strategic.
Well, economics and military, you mean?
Absolutely. Two main things. First, riches, the hope of gold, silver, timber, maybe valuable plants. But maybe even more important, it was meant to be a forward base.
To harass the Spanish.
Precisely. A permanent English spot in the New World to raid those massive Spanish treasure fleets sailing back across the Atlantic. Spain was a superpower then.
So, step one was just checking the place out. The 1584 reconnaissance mission, Armadas and Barlow. And they kind of set the stage for trouble, didn't they, with those glowing reports?
They really did. They painted this picture of paradise, found good land, and crucially at first, relations with the local tribes seemed okay, specifically the Secatan and the Croatoan.
And they brought back two Native Americans, Wanchese and Manteo.
Yes, Wanchese from the Secatan, Manteo from the Croatoan. They went back to England, sort of as proof of concept, you could say, and also to learn English, act as interpreters later.
And these two figures, Wanchese and Manteo, they become so central to this whole story. Their experiences in England seem to have really diverged.
Hugely. Manteo, he generally stayed pretty friendly towards the English throughout. Wanchese, though, he saw the inequality, the greed, maybe, in English society. He grew really suspicious, hostile even.
And that tension gets carried right back to Roanoke when the first proper settlement attempt arrives in 1585.
Right. And this 1585-86 group, you have to understand, it wasn't families building homes. It was a military outpost. About 600 men, mostly soldiers, led by Sir Richard Grenville and Governor Ralph Lane.
And it was basically doomed from the start, wasn't it, because of that supply disaster?
Yeah, the Tiger. That's the moment it all starts to fall apart. Their main ship, the Tiger, carrying almost all their essential supplies, food, seeds, tools, fresh water.
Runs aground in the Outer Banks, which are notoriously tricky waters.
Exactly. Ran hard aground, ruined the bulk of their supplies, especially the food. So right away, the mission changes.
It goes from planned colonization to desperate survival.
Totally. Grenville had to send 500 men straight back to England. Lane was left with only about 100 guys, maybe 107, and almost no way to feed themselves for a year. They were instantly dependent on the local tribes.
Tribes they seemed determined to alienate almost immediately. Which brings us to the Silver Cup incident.
Oh yeah, it perfectly shows their lack of strategy, or maybe arrogance. They accuse a nearby village, Aquaculguk, of stealing the Silver Cup. Probably not even that valuable, really.
And when it's not returned...
Governor Lane doesn't negotiate. He goes in hard, burns the entire village down, and maybe the worst part, strategically destroys their corn supply.
Let me get this straight. You're starving. You need the locals for food. And over maybe a stolen cup, you burn their village and their food source.
It's, breathtakingly bad judgment. Any trust, any chance of cooperation just evaporated right there.
And the tensions just kept rising.
They did. Lane, probably feeling the pressure, facing starvation, he ends up killing the second-in-chief, Wengina. That completely shatters any hope of stable relations with that powerful local group.
So by 1586, they're starving, surrounded by hostile tribes. Grenville hasn't shown up with the promised resupply.
They must have been desperate.
Utterly desperate, ready to get out any way they could, and just by chance, Sir Francis Drake sails by.
The famous privateer Drake, coming back from raiding Spanish settlements. Yep. Exactly. He swings by in May or June 1586. Lane's men basically begged him for passage back to England. They just abandoned everything and left.
And then the kicker, Grenville finally arrives with supplies just 2 weeks later.
The timing is just tragic irony. He finds the place deserted. So, to keep England's claim on the land, to save face politically, Grenville makes this, well, cynical move.
He leaves 15 men behind.
Yeah, just 15 men with supplies supposedly for a year. Basically just human placeholders, like England was here.
And what happened to them when John White's group arrived the next year?
They found bones, the remains of maybe one man. No sign of the other 14. So that first military attempt, total failure. Left behind bad blood, hostile neighbors, and a deep-seated distrust of the English. That's the stage for the next act, #2. The arrival and abandonment of the civilian colony, 1587-1590.
Okay, so Raleigh doesn't give up. He tries again in 1587, but this time it's different, right? This is the civilian colony.
Completely different plan. John White is now governor. He's an artist, a map maker. Seems like a more thoughtful leader. And the colonists are families. 121 men, women, and children. Brickmakers, tailors, farmers, people intending to stay.
This was meant to be the real deal, planting English society. And they had a better location plan this time, too.
They did. The plan was absolutely not Roanoke. It was about 50 miles north in Chesapeake Bay.
Why Chesapeake? What was better about it?
Oh, much better. Roanoke's out on those barrier islands, exposed, hard to reach. Chesapeake Bay offered this huge, sheltered harbor, potentially better farmland, and a chance to settle further inland, away from the tribes they'd already fought with.
Makes sense. So, why did they end up back at Roanoke, the place with all the bad history?
One man, essentially. Simon Fernandez, the chief pilot, the navigator of the fleet.
Okay, what did he do?
Well, Fernandez was also a privateer. Accounts suggest he was impatient. He wanted to drop the colonists off quickly and get back to the lucrative business of hunting Spanish ships in the Caribbean.
So he refused to sail further north?
Pretty much. They stopped at Roanoke, supposedly just to check on those 15 men Grenville had left. Fernandez then basically said, "This is it. Season's getting late, waters are tricky, I'm not going further." He effectively marooned them there.
Wow. Stranded them right back on the site of the failed, violent military colony? That's a terrible start.
Terrible start. They're forced to rebuild on poisoned ground. But amidst that, there was that one moment of hope the history books always mention.
Virginia Dare.
August 18th, 1587. Virginia Dare is born. John White's granddaughter. The first English child born in the New World. A huge symbol for the crown, for the whole venture. Proof it could work.
But symbols don't fill bellies. The reality must have bitten hard, fast. Did the hostilities start up again quickly?
Immediately. The local tribes remembered Lane's men. One of the colonists, George Howe, was killed while out crabbing alone. That sent a wave of fear through the settlement. They knew they were vulnerable.
And White tried to retaliate.
He did. He wanted to show strength, maybe get revenge. He led a raid.
Yeah.
But another disaster.
What?
Poor intelligence. Panic. They were supposed to attack the tribe responsible for Howe's death, but instead they attacked a group of Croatoan, Mateo's people.
The only friendly tribe they had left.
The only ones. They were apparently just scavenging in an abandoned village. White attacked them by mistake. That mistake likely fractured their last lifeline.
So they're short on supplies because Fernandez dumped them early, they can't rely on the land easily, and now they've alienated their only potential allies.
Exactly. Panic sets in. The colonists realize they won't survive the winter without help from England. They plead with White, their governor, to go back immediately for supplies and reinforcements.
But his family was there. His daughter, Eleanor Dare, his granddaughter, Virginia.
He absolutely did not want to leave them. The sources say he resisted fiercely. But the colonists were desperate. They apparently threatened to just disappear into the woods or starve if he didn't go. They basically forced his hand.
So he agrees. He sails back to England in late 1587, leaving 116 people behind.
Including his own family, intending to return quickly.
And then Europe intervenes. In the worst possible way.
The Anglo-Spanish War. White arrives back in England right as tensions are peaking. By 1588, the Spanish Armada is sailing. It's an existential threat to England.
So all available ships are needed for defense.
Every single seaworthy vessel. Queen Elizabeth orders them all pressed into service. White's small supply ships. absolutely needed for the war effort. His mission to save his colony, his family, it becomes completely secondary to national survival.
He's trapped.
Utterly trapped. He tried, apparently made a couple of desperate attempts to get ships. One even got attacked by the Spanish, but he couldn't get back. For 3 agonizing years.
3 years. You just can't imagine the waiting, the not knowing for him and for the people left behind.
It's heartbreaking, every passing month reducing their chances. It wasn't until 1590, after the Armada threat was over, that he could finally arrange passage back. Hashtag tag 3K, the clue of Croatoan and the vanished settlement.
Okay, so August 1590. It's actually Virginia Dare's 3rd birthday. John White finally makes it back to Roanoke Island after 3 years. What does he find?
He finds silence, an eerie quiet. The settlement, the houses they'd built, were gone. Carefully dismantled, it seemed, not destroyed. The materials likely taken.
Taken where?
Well, that's the question. But the whole area where the settlement had been was now enclosed by this big, strong defensive wall, a palisade, built after he left. Suggests they were expecting trouble, or planning to hold out for a while.
But no sign of a fight. This really goes against the massacre theory that was popular for so long.
Completely. No signs of battle, no bodies, no bones, no mass graves found then or since, no fire damage to the palisade. White himself described it as looking like they left in an orderly fashion.
What about their stuff? Did they take everything?
They took everything portable, everything valuable. What was left behind were the heavy things. Iron cannons, big anchors, maybe heavy tools. Things you wouldn't drag with you if you were fleeing in panic or being forced out.
That orderliness, the heavy stuff left behind, that really points away from violence, doesn't it?
It's probably the strongest piece of evidence against a sudden attack right there at the settlement site. And then he found the message.
The carving.
First, on a tree near the edge, just 3 letters. C-R-O. Like maybe they started carving and were interrupted, or just marking the trail.
Okay.
But then on one of the main posts of the palisade itself, carved clearly, deeply, the full word, Croatoan.
And this must have given White some hope because they had an agreement, right? A code.
Exactly. This code is so crucial. Before White left in 1587, they agreed. If the colonists had to relocate by choice, for whatever reason, they would carve the name of their destination onto a prominent tree or post.
Okay, so Croatoan meant they went to Croatoan Island.
That was the assumption. But there was another part to the code. If they were forced to leave under duress, attacked, captured, facing imminent danger, they were supposed to carve a Maltese cross above the destination name.
And there was no cross.
No cross. White specifically looked for it and noted its absence. For him, this was confirmation. It meant they hadn't been overrun or destroyed. They had chosen to leave and gone to Croatoan Island.
Which was Manteo's home island, modern Hatteras Island, about 50 miles south, where they might find refuge with his tribe.
It seemed a logical, hopeful explanation. In the face of starvation or worsening conflict, moving to join their only known friendly allies made perfect sense as a survival strategy.
But White never got to confirm it. He never reached Croatoan Island.
That's the final tragedy of his story. He was ready to go. He convinced the ship's captain. But just as they were about to sail south, a huge storm blew up. A hurricane, probably, common in the Outer Banks that time of year.
The weather strikes again.
It battered them. They lost anchors, the ships were damaged. The crew, who were mostly privateers just giving White passage, basically refused to risk it further. They saw it as too dangerous.
They wouldn't go.
They wouldn't go. Their priority shifted to salvaging their own voyage, maybe finding Spanish prizes in the Caribbean. They turned away from Croatoan and eventually sailed back to England.
And John White
Never got another chance to return to America. He died years later in England, never knowing for sure what happened to his daughter, his granddaughter, or the colony he governed. Just that single word, Croatoan, and the missing cross. Hashtag tag 40. Analyzing the theories and evidence.
So for centuries, the story was often simplified, massacre. But White's own account plus later evidence really points towards assimilation, right? Let's dig into that theory first because it seems to have the most physical backing. Hashtag A, assimilation and integration, the most accepted theory.
Right. The core of this theory is that word Croatoan and the fact there was no distress signal, no cross. It suggests a planned move to Manteo's people on Hatteras Island, likely driven by hunger or conflict back at Roanoke.
And it wasn't just White's interpretation. There were later reports suggesting this actually happened, yeah.
Over a century later, yes. John Lawson, an English explorer, spent time in the Carolinas around 1701 to 1709. He wrote about encountering the Hatteras Indians, who were the descendants of the Croatoan tribe.
And what did he report?
It's fascinating. He said some of them claimed their ancestors were white people. He noted they had European features, specifically gray eyes, which were uncommon among other local tribes. Some even spoke English remarkably well. Lawson himself concluded they had likely intermarried and assimilated.
That's pretty strong anecdotal evidence, but the archaeology on Hatteras Island, that's where we get actual physical proof, isn't it? The hammer scale.
Exactly. This is probably the most compelling physical evidence found so far. Excavations at known Croatoan village sites on Hatteras have turned up European trade goods, bits of metal, pottery, copper rings, which you might expect. But the key find is hammer scale.
Okay, remind us what hammer scale is and why it's so important. It's not just a traded item.
Right. Hammer scale is microscopic flakes of iron oxide that fly off when a blacksmith heats iron in a forge and hammers it. It's a specific byproduct of working iron, not just owning an iron tool.
So finding it mixed in with Native American artifacts at the Hatteras site means?
It means English blacksmiths were actively working iron within that native village. The English were the only ones in the area with that technology at that time. It wasn't just a brief visit or trade. It indicates sustained activity, maybe over decades.
They were living and working there, contributing their skills.
It strongly suggests long-term cohabitation and integration. The English settlers became part of the Croatoan community, using their unique skills like metalworking. It fits the assimilation model perfectly.
Okay, that covers the move south to Croatoan. But what about White's original note that the colonists wanted to move 50 miles inland to the north, not south to another island?
Ah, yes. This leads to the split colony idea, which got a huge boost from a discovery in 2012. Researchers were looking at one of John White's original maps from 1586 using special imaging techniques.
And they found something hidden.
They found a tiny patch over a specific area on the map. Underneath, revealed by the imaging, was a symbol like a star or fort, marked in blue and red ink. Possibly invisible ink originally.
A hidden mark. Why hide it?
Could be to keep the location secret from the Spanish, who were definitely looking for the English colony.
Right.
Or maybe even from rival English investors back home. But the location it marked, now called Site X, is near the Chowan River, about 50 miles inland to the north. Exactly where White said they discussed moving.
And have they found anything at Site X?
They have. Archaeological digs there have uncovered English pottery shards, bits of metal tools, things consistent with late 16th century English presence. Not a huge settlement, perhaps, but evidence that some colonists might have gone there.
So we have Croatoan carved pointing south, and this hidden map marker pointing north. How do historians reconcile that?
The most logical explanation seems to be that the colony didn't all go to one place. They likely split up, maybe based on need or plan. Perhaps the families focused on farming went north to Site X, seeking that better mainland soil White wrote about, while others, maybe needing immediate food and safety, went south to the known friendly Croatoan on Hatteras.
So not one single disappearance, but maybe two or more smaller migrations, making them even harder to track later.
Exactly. It complicates the picture, but it fits the available evidence better than a single destination theory. Hashtag Heavy-bore hide hardship and conflict theories.
Okay, so assimilation, possibly in split groups, seems likely. But we have to remember the reasons they left Roanoke were probably pretty grim. Hardship played a huge role.
Absolutely. Famine and disease were constant threats. They arrived with damaged supplies, struggled to grow enough food, and the timing was terrible, environmentally.
The Little Ice Age.
Yeah, tree ring data, climate studies, they showed that the late 1580s saw some of the most severe droughts in centuries in that region, plus colder winters. It would have devastated their crops and made reliance on native food sources critical.
Which, given the conflicts, was a problem.
A huge problem.
Yeah.
And while we don't have confirmed Roanoke graves, skeletal remains found in the broader area from that period do show signs of malnutrition. Plus, they had no immunity to New World diseases. These factors likely didn't kill everyone, but they surely made staying at Roanoke impossible and pushed them towards migration.
But the idea of a massacre hasn't completely gone away. What about the reports from Jamestown?
Right. Jamestown was founded about 20 years later in 1607, and stories did reach them. The most prominent one was that the powerful Powhatan chief, Wohonthanacal Pocahontas' father, claimed he had attacked and wiped out the Roanoke survivors.
Went long after they left Roanoke.
The timeline varies in reports, but some suggest the colonists might have been living peacefully for years, maybe with the Chesapeake tribe near Powhatan territory, and then Powhatan attacked them maybe around 1609, possibly seeing them as rivals or intruders.
So they assimilated, survived for 20 years, and then got massacred by a different group.
It's a possibility that bridges the assimilation evidence with the massacre reports. Powhatan was definitely consolidating power. Eliminating a group with European ties living among his rivals could have been a strategic move.
But it still doesn't quite fit with White finding that orderly, peaceful scene in 1590, does it? And where are the bodies from this later massacre?
Those are the big problems with the Powhatan theory. No archaeological evidence of such a large-scale killing has ever been found, and it contradicts the initial scene.
What about the Spanish? Could they have found them and wiped them out secretly?
Very unlikely. The Spanish certainly wanted to find and destroy the English colony. They had destroyed a French one earlier. But, again, no distress cross was found. And perhaps more tellingly, Spanish records show they were still actively searching for the location of the English settlement 10 years after White's 1590 visit. They clearly hadn't found and destroyed it. ###see fringe and cultural theories.
Roanoke seems to attract some wilder ideas, too. We should probably touch on the Dare Stones. That's a famous, controversial part of the story.
Oh, the Dare Stones. Yeah, that's a whole saga. It started in the 1930s, during the Depression. A stone was found near the Chowan River, right in that Site X area. It was supposedly inscribed by Eleanor Dare, White's daughter.
What did it say?
It claimed the colonists had moved inland, faced terrible famine and Indian attacks, and by 1591 only 7 were left alive, including Eleanor herself. It even mentioned Virginia Dare had died. A really harrowing account. If true, it would confirm the inland migration and a tragic end.
It sounded like the answer everyone was looking for, but...
But then more stones started turning up, dozens of them. And linguistic analysis, scientific testing, eventually proved most of these later stones were outright fakes. Created by a stonecutter named Bill Eberhardt, probably for the attention or maybe reward money.
They used modern words and grammar.
Exactly. Anachronisms like using the word primeval, modern spellings, things that prove they couldn't have been written in 1591. This fraud cast huge doubt on the authenticity of even the first stone.
Is the first one still debated?
A little bit. Some argue its language and carving are slightly more plausible than the later fakes. But the sheer scale of the Eberhardt fraud makes it really hard for most historians to accept any of the Dare stones as genuine evidence today. It's mostly seen as a historical sideshow.
Okay, what about the actual fort site we see today, Fort Raleigh? Is that even the right place?
That's another controversy. The earthwork fort you can visit today is largely a 1950s reconstruction of what was likely a smaller, earlier military structure built by Lane's men in 1585. But John White's account from 1590 says the original settlement's fort or palisade had been razed down.
Meaning dismantled or destroyed?
Yeah, probably leveled or even burned by natives after the 1586 evacuation. So the palisade White found in 1590, the one with Croatoan carved on it, might have been in a slightly different location nearby. Some archaeologists have wanted to dig in other spots, thinking the real site, and maybe more clues, are still buried elsewhere. Permits have been hard to get, though.
And one last fringe idea? The sassafras theory, that the whole thing was a secret operation.
This one suggests the colony wasn't meant to succeed publicly, that it was a cover for Raleigh to secretly harvest sassafras, which was incredibly valuable back then, seen as a miracle cure-all.
So the vanishing was staged to throw off rivals?
Yeah, the idea is Raleigh faked the failure to keep the Spanish and other English investors away from his lucrative sassafras source. It's clever, maybe cynical, but requires a huge level of secrecy and coordination that's almost impossible to prove from this distance. It remains very much a fringe theory. #TechTechV, final analysis, and the lasting legacy.
So putting it all together, the archaeology, the historical accounts, the map evidence, it really seems like the most likely story isn't about vanishing into thin air, but about making a hard choice to survive.
The weight of evidence definitely points towards voluntary migration and assimilation. The lack of the cross, the hammer scale on Hatteras, the orderly departure, it all fits.
And the split destination idea helps explain the conflicting clues. Some likely went south to Croatoan, others north towards the Chowan River area, Site X.
It's exactly. Facing starvation and likely hostility, splitting up might have seemed the best bet, seeking refuge with Manteo's people while others tried for better farmland inland.
Which leads to the real mystery, perhaps. Not where they went initially, but why they never re-emerged. Why no contact with Jamestown 20 years later?
And the most compelling answer seems to be, they didn't just move. They transformed, they assimilated, they stopped being English colonists and became part of the native communities they joined.
Survival meant giving up their old identity, which from the perspective of England and John White would have seemed almost like a kind of death in itself.
A cultural death, perhaps. And that's why Roanoke has become such a powerful myth, I think. It's morphed from this specific historical event into a metaphor for the unknown, the unexplained disappearance.
Yeah, you see it everywhere in pop culture, novels, TV shows. That word Croatoan itself has become almost ominous, a symbol of vanishing.
When originally it was just the name of an island and a tribe that likely offered them refuge. The horror interpretation is a much later layer.
So the story forces us to think about what lost really means here. Maybe they weren't lost, just changed, blended into the landscape they came to claim.
It was likely a quiet series of decisions born out of desperation, not one big, dramatic catastrophe. And quiet, slow transformation is often harder for history to capture than a loud disaster.
We've sort of peeled back the layers on this 400-year-old case file today, from that initial conflict over a silver cup,
To the geopolitical drama of the Spanish Armada delaying rescue.
and finally to the tiny bits of hammer scale proving English blacksmiths were working alongside Native Americans.
I think the greatest mystery, the thing that still gives you pause, isn't just the where. It's the unsettling fact that 115 individual European lives, people with names like Ananias Dare, Eleanor Dare, John White's own family, their hopes, their origins could just dissolve from the historical record.
Leaving behind just that single cryptic word.
What does that silence tell us about history's limits, about its ability to track individual lives when all that's left is the trace of their merging into something else?
That's definitely something profound to think about. The quiet transformation versus the recorded event.
It's a question that hangs over the story and maybe over much of the early encounter between worlds.
Well, thank you for joining us for this exploration on the Deep Dive, brought to you by the Memory Room podcast. We hope you'll continue pondering the Croatoan enigma. We'll see you next time.